3 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was a very different place. News of humanity's victory had spread faster than the surviving Zilani ships could flee, carried by the same automated communication networks that the aliens had built to control their empire. On 17 different worlds, species that had lived under Zilani rule for generations looked up at their skies and dared to hope. The Thalari people of Kepler Prime were the first to declare independence, followed quickly by the mining colonies of the Axton system. Within weeks, the mighty Zilani hegemony was falling apart as world after world broke free from alien control. Ambassador Kate Wilson stood at the window of her new office on Kepler Station, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the neutral trading post. She had been chosen to represent humanity in its first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Council, an organization that the Zilani had never bothered to mention during their brief and hostile first contact. "Ma'am, the Council representatives are ready to meet with you," her aide said from the doorway. Kate nodded and straightened her uniform. A year ago, she had been teaching diplomatic history at the University of Geneva. Now, she was about to help write a new chapter in galactic history. The council chamber was unlike anything Kate had ever seen. Representatives from species across the galaxy sat in a vast circular room, each delegation occupying seats designed for their particular biology. There were beings that looked like living crystals, others that resembled giant insects, and some that seemed to be made of pure energy contained in mechanical bodies. "The human delegation is recognized," announced the council speaker, a tall being with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors as it spoke. "We welcome Earth to the community of free worlds and thank you for your service in ending Zilani tyranny." Kate walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. "Thank you for accepting us into your community. Humanity looks forward to learning from and working with all of you." A representative from the Vorthan Republic stood up. The Vorthan looked like a cross between a tree and a squid, with bark-like skin and tentacles instead of arms. "We must ask, Ambassador Wilson, how did your species defeat the Zilani when so many others failed? Their technology was far superior to anything we possess." Kate smiled. "That's exactly why we won. The Zilani expected us to fight them with superior technology, but we're not a superior species. We're just different." Back on Earth, Dr. Nina Bell was working in her expanded laboratory, studying pieces of captured Zilani technology. The alien devices were incredibly advanced, but they all shared the same weakness that had doomed their creators. They were too perfect, too organized, too predictable. "The Zilani built everything to work in perfect harmony," she explained to a group of visiting scientists from other worlds. "Every system connected to every other system in logical patterns. But that also meant that when one system failed, the failure could spread everywhere." Dr. Sam Rodriguez nodded from his seat in the front row. He had been working with alien scientists for months now, sharing human knowledge and learning about technologies from across the galaxy. "Human engineering is messier but more resilient. Our systems have redundancies and manual backups that don't make logical sense, but they work when everything else fails." On Mars, former Governor Charles Webb was no longer calling for surrender. He had become one of the loudest voices calling for human expansion into the galaxy. "We proved that being primitive isn't always a disadvantage," he told a crowd of colonists. "Sometimes the simple solution is the best solution." The prison facility on Luna held the highest-ranking Zilani prisoners of war, including Overseer Kethvar. The alien commander had requested a meeting with Dr. Rodriguez to discuss what had happened during the battle. "I have studied your species for months now," Kethavar said, his mental voice much quieter than it had been during first contact. "I believe I finally understand our error." Dr. Rodriguez sat across from the alien in the specially designed interview room. "What error was that?" "We saw chaos in your minds and assumed it was weakness," Kethavar explained. "But chaos is not the opposite of order. It is the source of infinite possibility. Your minds can think thoughts that no ordered intelligence could ever conceive. Is that why you lost the battle?" The alien's crystalline features seemed to dim. "We lost because we could not imagine losing. Our simulations showed us victory in every scenario because we could not conceive of tactics that made no logical sense. Your people attacked us with flying rocks and suicide runs and manual controls. No rational species would fight that way." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. "But we're not entirely rational, are we? That's what makes us human." Admiral Brooks had been promoted to head of the new Galactic Defense Force, a joint military organization designed to prevent any single species from dominating others the way the Zalani had. Her headquarters was on Kepler Station, where she worked with officers from dozens of different worlds. "The key to our success," she told her mixed staff of humans and aliens, "was not trying to be something we weren't. We didn't try to out-technology the Zalani or out-organize them. We just fought like humans, and that was enough." Commander Tony Martinez had survived his attack on the Void Renders and become something of a legend among fighter pilots across the galaxy. He now ran a training program where human pilots taught alien flyers how to fly by instinct instead of computer calculation. "Flying by computer is safe and predictable," he told his mixed class of human and alien students. "But safe and predictable can also be slow and vulnerable. Sometimes you need to trust your gut and do something crazy." A young Thalari pilot raised her hand. "But how do you calculate the odds of success for crazy maneuvers?" Tony grinned. "You don't. That's what makes them work." Captain Jake Morrison had been given command of the new exploration ship UES Discovery, humanity's first vessel designed specifically for long-range diplomatic missions. His crew was half human and half alien, and they were about to depart on a mission to make contact with species beyond the former Zalani territory. Amy Turner was his chief science officer, and she had learned more about alien biology in the past year than in her entire previous career. "The galaxy is full of different ways of thinking and living," she told Morrison as they prepared for departure. "The Zalani thought their way was the only right way, but they were wrong." Pete Collins had become the chief engineer for the entire human space fleet, and his designs were being studied by alien engineers who couldn't quite understand how human technology worked so well despite being so disorganized. "The secret," he told them, "is that sometimes the best solution is the one nobody expects." On Kepler Station, Kate Wilson met with representatives from species that had been fighting the Zalani for centuries. The Mordak Confederacy had lost 3 star systems to alien conquest. The Free Traders Alliance had seen their shipping routes disrupted and their colonies enslaved. "How long did you resist before the Zalani conquered you?" Kate asked the Mordak representative. 6 months, the alien replied. "Our fleets were destroyed and our worlds occupied. We thought resistance was hopeless. And you?" Kate turned to the Free Trader delegate. 4 months. The Zalani were too organized, too coordinated. They predicted our every move." Kate nodded. "That's why they never conquered us. We're too disorganized for them to predict." The final scene of humanity's first year as a galactic power took place in the gardens of Kepler Station. Human children played with alien youngsters from a dozen different species, inventing games that had no rules and made no sense to adult observers. Kate Wilson watched them play and smiled. The young Zilani in the group, children of the prisoners of war, were learning to laugh for the first time in their lives. They were discovering that chaos could be fun, that disorder could lead to joy, and that sometimes the best games were the ones where nobody knew what would happen next. "Ambassador Wilson," said the Vorthan representative, who had questioned her in the council chamber, "I have been studying your people for months, and I still do not fully understand how you think." Kate watched a human child teach a group of alien youngsters how to play tag, a game with rules that changed every few minutes based on whoever was it at the moment. "That's okay," she said. "Most of the time we don't understand how we think either." "Then how do you make decisions? How do you plan for the future?" Kate smiled as she watched the children run and laugh and make up new rules on the spot. "We don't plan everything out in advance. We just keep moving forward and figure it out as we go." The Vorthan was quiet for a long moment. The Zilani planned everything perfectly. They knew exactly what they wanted to achieve and how to achieve it. "And look how that worked out for them," Kate replied. In the years that followed, humanity would become known throughout the galaxy as the species that brought chaos to order and found strength in confusion. They would explore new worlds, make contact with new species, and solve problems in ways that no other civilization could understand or predict. But they would always remember the lesson of their first contact with the Zilani. Sometimes being primitive was exactly what the galaxy needed. Sometimes the best response to superior technology and perfect organization was to be completely, utterly, and magnificently. The battle around Earth had turned into chaos that the Zilani could not understand or control. Their perfect formations were broken, their coordination was failing, and primitive human ships were attacking from every direction using weapons that made no sense. Admiral Vextar tried to regain control of his fleet from the bridge of the Star Crusher. "All ships fall back to defensive positions. Reform the battle line." But his orders were met with confusion as ship after ship reported damage from the continuing asteroid bombardment. Captain Jake Morrison brought the Liberty alongside a damaged Zilani destroyer, using the ship's mechanical grappling hooks to lock the two vessels together. "Boarding parties away," he ordered, and watched as Alex Turner led his Marines through the airlock into the alien ship. The interior of the Zilani vessel was like nothing the humans had ever seen. Walls of living crystal pulsed with strange light, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. But the aliens inside were just as confused and frightened as any other species would be when their perfect world suddenly fell apart. Alex Turner moved through the alien corridors with his rifle ready, but most of the Zilani they encountered seemed too shocked to fight back. "They're not used to things going wrong," he reported to Morrison. "I don't think they know how to handle unexpected situations." Meanwhile, Amy Turner was analyzing the captured alien communication equipment from her position on the research station. "I'm getting some of their internal communications," she told Admiral Brooks. "They're having trouble coordinating because their mental link system wasn't designed for this kind of chaos." The Zilani had built their entire society around perfect order and shared consciousness. When everything went according to plan, they were incredibly efficient. But when plans failed and chaos took over, their greatest strength became their greatest weakness. Dr. Nina Bell had been studying the battle from her laboratory and made an important discovery. The alien ships are all connected through some kind of network, she reported. If we could damage their command ship, it might disrupt their entire fleet. Admiral Brooks looked at her tactical display and saw the massive Star Crusher holding a position at the center of what remained of the Zalani formation. All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship. We need to bring down their command structure. But the Star Crusher was heavily shielded and armored. Human weapons struck its hull again and again without causing serious damage. The alien flagship was simply too big and too well protected for conventional attacks to work. That's when Corporal Danny Walsh made a decision that would be remembered forever. His frigate UES Brave had taken heavy damage from alien weapons and was drifting with failing life support. 3 Zalani destroyers were closing in to finish off his ship and capture the survivors. Danny looked around at his injured crew and made a choice that only a human could make. Instead of surrendering or trying to escape, he did something completely insane. He overloaded the ship's reactor and pointed the Brave directly at the Star Crusher. "This is Corporal Walsh to all ships," he said over the communication system. "Tell my family I did my duty." Then he cut the communication and focused on his flying. The Brave accelerated toward the alien flagship like a missile made of metal and fury. The Zalani tried to shoot it down, but the small human ship was moving too fast and too erratically for their targeting systems to track. Danny was flying by instinct and anger, dodging energy beams with moves that no computer could calculate. The frigate struck the Star Crusher amidships and exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. The blast tore a massive hole in the alien ship's hull and sent shock waves through its crystalline structure. But more importantly, it disrupted the network connections that linked the Zalani fleet together. Admiral Vexitar felt the mental link with his other ships flicker and fade as the Star Crusher's communication array went offline. Suddenly, each Zalani captain was alone with his own thoughts for the first time in years. The perfect coordination that had made them invincible was gone. "Sir, we've lost contact with most of the fleet," his communications officer reported. "The network is down." But the battle was far from over. The massive Zalani dreadnought Void Renders, the same ship that had humiliated humanity a year ago, was still intact and moving toward Earth. Its commander, Overseer Kethvar, was determined to complete the mission even if the rest of the fleet had failed. "Charge the planet killer weapon," Kethvar ordered. "If we cannot conquer these primitives, we will destroy them as an example to the rest of the galaxy." The Void Renders began to glow with terrible energy as its main weapon powered up. The dreadnought was over 2 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack planets. No human ship could stand against it in direct combat. That's when pilot Tony Martinez made his own impossible choice. His fighter had been damaged in the battle and was running low on fuel, but he was close enough to the alien dreadnought to see its weak points. Dr. Bell had identified them months ago during her analysis of the Zalani technology. "This is Martinez to all ships," he said over the radio. "I have a shot at the big one, but I need to get close, real close." Casey Morgan tried to reach him over the communication system. "Tony, that's suicide. That ship is too big and too heavily armed." "Maybe," Tony replied. "But I've got 1 torpedo left and I know exactly where to put it." Tony's fighter dove toward the Void Renders like a hawk attacking a giant. The alien ship's defensive weapons fired continuously, filling space with deadly energy beams. But Tony wasn't flying by computer anymore. He was flying by feel, by instinct, by the kind of human intuition that aliens couldn't understand or predict. He dodged between the weapon beams like he was dancing, his fighter spinning and rolling through patterns that seemed random but were actually perfectly calculated by a human mind working at its absolute limit. The Zilani targeting computers couldn't track him because he wasn't following any logical flight path. "Come on, baby," Tony whispered to his ship as he dove toward the massive alien hull. "Just a little closer." The weak point Dr. Bell had identified was where the dreadnought's crystalline hull met its power core. The alien designers had made their ship incredibly strong, but they had also made it perfectly organized. Every part connected to every other part in logical patterns that could be analyzed and understood, and once understood, they could be broken. Tony's torpedo struck the exact junction point where the hull's crystal matrix was thinnest. The small, human weapon shouldn't have been able to damage such a massive ship, but it hit at precisely the right angle and at exactly the right moment. The void renders shuddered as cracks appeared along its hull. The cracks spread like lightning through the crystalline structure, following the perfect geometric patterns that made the ship so beautiful and so strong. But perfection had a price. When one small part failed, the failure spread everywhere. Admiral Vextar watched in horror from his damaged flagship as the mighty dreadnought began to break apart. "Impossible," he whispered. "The void renders is unsinkable. No primitive weapon can destroy a ship of that size." But the cracks kept spreading, and the beautiful crystal hull kept shattering. The 2-kilometer-long dreadnought split down the middle like a breaking mirror, and both halves began to tumble away from each other. Internal explosions lit up the darkness as the ship's power systems failed. Overseer Kethvar's last transmission was filled with disbelief and fear. "How can this be? We are the superior species. We have conquered 17 systems. Primitive animals cannot defeat us." The transmission cut off as the void renders completed its death spiral and exploded in a flash of light visible from Earth's surface. The ship that had humiliated humanity was now debris floating in space. The remaining Zilani ships saw their mighty dreadnought die and felt something they had never experienced before. They felt doubt. These humans weren't supposed to be able to fight back. They weren't supposed to be clever enough or brave enough or crazy enough to win. But they had won, and everyone in the galaxy would soon know it. Admiral Brooks looked at her tactical display and saw Zilani ships beginning to retreat. The perfect alien fleet was broken, their command structure was destroyed, and their confidence was shattered along with their biggest ship. "All ships, pursue the retreating enemy," she ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The human fleet, battered but victorious, chased the fleeing aliens toward the edge of the solar system. The species that had been called primitive had just done something that 17 other civilizations had failed to do. They had made the Zilani afraid. The Zilani invasion fleet came out of hyperspace like a pack of crystal wolves. 50 ships of various sizes arranged themselves in perfect formation around Earth's orbit, each one finding its exact position without any apparent communication between them. Admiral Vextar commanded from the flagship Star Crusher, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest human battleship. From the bridge of his command ship, Vextar studied the primitive world below. The blue and white planet looked peaceful and harmless, which made the Admiral even more confident. These humans had spent their year building more of their crude metal ships, but quantity could never overcome the vast difference in quality. "Begin the surrender broadcast," Vexitar ordered his communications officer. The message would go out on all human frequencies at once, demanding immediate submission to Zilani authority. The Admiral expected the response would be quick acceptance, followed by grateful relief that the humans would be spared. On Earth, President Rodriguez sat in the emergency command bunker deep under Geneva. The walls were lined with screens showing the positions of every Zalani ship, and the sight made her stomach turn. 50 alien vessels surrounded her world like vultures waiting for something to die. "Ma'am, we're receiving their surrender demand," the communications officer reported. "They want a response within 1 hour." Admiral Brooks spoke from her position aboard the UES Defiance flagship of the human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Brooks. Execute scattered formation. Make it look panicked and desperate." Her voice was calm, but inside she felt the weight of her species' survival on her shoulders. The human fleet began to break apart in what looked like complete disorder. Ships scattered in all directions like frightened animals, their movements seeming random and chaotic. Some vessels appeared to be trying to flee toward the outer planets, while others seemed to be moving to protect Earth. Admiral Vextar watched the human fleet's movements with satisfaction. Exactly as predicted. The primitives are scattering in fear rather than maintaining any kind of coordinated defense. He turned to his tactical officer. "Begin pursuit formation. We will surround and disable their vessels one by one. Try to minimize casualties. We need workers, not corpses." The Zalani fleet moved with mechanical precision, each ship taking its assigned position to intercept the fleeing humans. Their formation was flawless, maintaining exact distances and coordination as they had done countless times before against other primitive species. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the alien ships move into position around his vessel. "They're taking the bait," he said quietly to Commander Lisa Hayes. "Send the signal to all ships. Phase 1 is working." Throughout the solar system, human ships continued their seemingly panicked flight. The UES Courage, commanded by Captain Steve Walsh, fired its engines at maximum burn toward Mars, making it look like they were trying to reach the safety of the Martian defense platforms. The UES Honor, under Captain Tom Bradley, seemed to be making a desperate run for the asteroid belt. What the Zalani didn't realize was that every human ship was exactly where it was supposed to be. The chaos they saw was carefully planned disorder, designed to draw the alien fleet into the perfect position for what came next. Dr. Nina Bell sat in her laboratory on Luna, watching the tactical display with growing excitement. "The alien ships are moving into the target zone," she reported to Admiral Brooks. "Their formation is holding steady just like we hoped." Amy Turner was aboard a research station hidden behind one of Jupiter's moons. Her job was to monitor the alien communications and confirm that they were falling for the deception. "They're still talking about capturing human ships intact," she reported. "They think we're just running scared." In the asteroid belt, thousands of mining platforms that had been operating for decades suddenly went quiet. To any observer, it would look like the mining crews had evacuated in panic, but Pete Collins knew better. He sat in the control center of Mining Platform 7, watching. Screens that showed the positions of every piece of equipment in the belt. "All platforms report ready," he said into his communicator. "The alien fleet is right where we want them." The asteroids around the platforms had been hollowed out and fitted with simple rocket engines over the past year. Not the advanced ion, drives that powered human ships, but old-fashioned chemical rockets that burned hot and fast. The rocks themselves had been carved and shaped into perfect kinetic weapons. Dense, heavy, and moving fast enough to punch through almost anything. Admiral Vextar was pleased with how easily the humans were being herded into position. His ships had surrounded most of the fleeing human vessels without firing a single shot. "Begin disable sequence," he ordered. Target their engines and weapon systems. Leave life support intact. The first Zalani energy pulses reached their targets, and several human ships went dark, their engines failing and their lights going out. To the aliens, it looked like complete success. The primitive vessels were helpless against superior Zalani technology. But Captain Morrison smiled as his ship's lights went out. The Liberty's main systems had been shut down by the alien pulse, exactly as planned. But the backup systems were still running. Hidden mechanical controls that looked like simple maintenance panels were actually fully functional command systems. "Now," Morrison said quietly, and pressed a large red button that looked like it belonged in a factory from 100 years ago. Throughout the solar system, similar buttons were being pressed on ships that appeared to be disabled. The UES Defiance suddenly blazed back to life, its engines roaring at full power. The Admiral Brooks had been waiting for this moment for a year. "All ships, execute reversal," she commanded. "Show these aliens what humans really fight like." The scattered human fleet suddenly changed direction. Ships that had been fleeing in panic turned around and charged straight at the surprised Zalani vessels. What had looked like disorder became coordination, and what had seemed like cowardice became courage. But the real surprise was still coming. Deep in the asteroid belt, Pete Collins gave his own signal. "All platforms, launch everything." Thousands of modified asteroids suddenly lit up with rocket exhaust. The huge rocks began moving toward the inner system, accelerating to incredible speeds. Each one was a kinetic weapon weighing millions of tons and moving fast enough to crack planets. Admiral Vextar stared at his tactical display in confusion. "What is happening? Where did these projectiles come from?" His tactical officer was frantically checking sensors. "Sir, they appear to be naturally occurring asteroids, but they're moving under power. The humans have somehow weaponized their mining operation." The Zalani fleet tried to adjust their formation to deal with this unexpected threat, but their perfect coordination was working against them. Each ship was locked into its assigned position relative to the others, and changing. Formation required time and careful calculation. Time they didn't have. The first wave of kinetic weapons reached the outer edge of the Zalani fleet, and the results were spectacular. Energy shields that could stop laser beams and plasma bolts were useless against solid matter moving at orbital velocity. The alien ships crumpled like aluminum cans hit by sledgehammers. Alex Turner led his Marine boarding party onto the damaged Zalani cruiser Void Strike through a hole punched by a small asteroid. The aliens inside were stunned and confused, their perfect coordination broken by the unexpected attack. "Secure the command center," Turner ordered his troops. "We need their communication codes." Casey Morgan piloted her fighter through the chaos of the battle, using manual controls to navigate between pieces of debris that the Zalani computers couldn't track. Her ship was tiny compared to the alien vessels, but she was human, and humans had been flying by instinct long before they had computers. Rick Stone's explosives were attached to several of the kinetic weapons, timed to detonate just after impact. The secondary explosions sent shrapnel through the Zalani formations, causing even more damage and confusion. The perfect alien battle formation was falling apart. Ships tried to break away from their assigned positions, but found themselves blocked by debris, damaged vessels, and human ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. What should have been an easy victory was turning into a nightmare. Admiral Vextar finally understood what had happened. They used our own tactics against us. They made us think they were fleeing so we would move into the perfect position for their trap. His communications officer looked up from his station with fear in his crystalline features. "Sir, we're receiving reports from all over the fleet. At least 15 ships have been destroyed or disabled. The humans are not fighting like any species we've encountered before." Vextar stared at the tactical display, watching his perfect fleet being torn apart by flying rocks and primitive human ships. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid. The emergency meeting room in Geneva was full of worried faces as President Helen Rodriguez called the Global Defense Council to order. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat around the long table, and every one of them had read the report from the Liberty. The first contact with aliens had not gone well. General Frank Davis spread out star charts on the table. He was a big man with gray hair who had spent his whole life preparing for war, but never a war like this. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem bigger than anything humanity has ever faced," he said. "The aliens have technology that makes our best weapons look like sticks and stones." Admiral Katie Brooks nodded from her seat near the window. She commanded the space fleet and knew every ship humanity had built. The Liberty's engines were destroyed by a single pulse of energy. They didn't even fire a real weapon at us. It was just a demonstration. Dr. Sam Rodriguez stood up with a thick folder in his hands. He had been studying the sensor data from the alien encounter for 2 weeks. "I've analyzed everything we recorded about their ship and technology. The power source alone is beyond our understanding. They're using some kind of energy that doesn't follow the laws of physics as we know them." President Rodriguez looked tired. She had been awake for 3 days straight trying to figure out what to do. "What are our options, people? Can we fight them?" Dr. Nina Bell laughed, but there was no humor in it. She was the smartest physicist on Earth, and she knew exactly how outmatched they were. "Fight them? Madam President, it would be like cavemen trying to fight a modern army. We might as well throw rocks at their ships." Charles Webb spoke up from his chair at the far end of the table. He was the governor of Mars Colony, and he looked scared. "Then maybe we should consider their offer. If we submit to their guidance, at least our species survives." "Survives as what?" General Davis asked. "As pets? As slaves? Did you hear what that alien said about guiding our evolution? They want to turn us into something else entirely." "Captain." Jake Morrison had been quiet since giving his report, but now he stood up. "I looked into that alien's eyes, or whatever they were. There was no warmth there, no understanding. To them, we're not even people. We're just smart animals that need to be trained." Commander Lisa Hayes sat next to him. She had spent years learning how to talk to different cultures, but the Zilani were beyond anything she had studied. The way they communicated was unlike anything I've experienced. They don't just talk to each other, they share thoughts directly. That's why they see our individual minds as chaotic noise. Amy Turner had been taking notes while everyone talked. "I've been thinking about what they said about order versus chaos. Maybe that's the key to understanding them. They can't comprehend how we think because we all think differently." Dr. Bell nodded slowly. "That might actually be important. Their technology seems to work by precise coordination. Every part of their ship worked together perfectly, like it was all one big machine." Pete Collins had been quiet too, but now he spoke up. "I've been going over the sensor readings of their ship. It's impressive, sure, but I noticed something. When they disabled our engines, they had to scan us first, like they needed to understand exactly how our systems worked before they could attack them." Admiral Brooks leaned forward. "What are you getting at, Chief?" "Well, ma'am, what if their technology is really good at dealing with things it understands, but not so good with things that are unexpected? Pete pulled out his own notes. Look at these energy readings. Their weapons seem to be designed to work against a certain type of shield and armor. What if we built something different? Dr. Rodriguez was interested now. Different how? Simple, Pete said. Really simple. So simple. They might not even think to defend against it. General Davis frowned. You want to fight advanced aliens with simple weapons? Not fight them directly, Pete explained, but maybe surprise them. They called us primitive, right? Maybe being primitive isn't always a bad thing. 3 months passed and the aliens kept their promise to watch Earth. Zilani monitoring stations appeared all over the solar system like mechanical flowers blooming in space. They didn't hide themselves or try to be sneaky about it. Why would they? They were studying animals in a zoo. The stations broadcast messages constantly. The voice of Overseer Kethvar could be heard on every communication channel, telling humans about their place in the galaxy. Your species has potential but needs guidance, the messages said. Submit to Zilani wisdom and become something greater than primitive chaos. Some humans listened and wanted to surrender. Fear spread through the colonies as people realized how small and weak Earth really was compared to an alien empire that controlled 17 star systems. Governor Webb organized meetings on Mars where people talked about accepting alien rule. Similar groups formed on Luna and the asteroid mining stations, but other humans had a different reaction. Dr. Bell worked 18 hours a day in her lab, studying every piece of data they had about Zilani technology. She discovered something interesting about human computers. The Zilani used energy-based systems that were incredibly advanced, but human computers used quantum uncertainty in ways that made them partially invisible to alien sensors. It's like they can't quite see how our computers work, she explained to Admiral Brooks. Their scanning technology is designed for energy patterns, but our quantum processors create patterns they can't read properly. Meanwhile, Pete Collins had been rebuilding the Liberty with new ideas. Instead of trying to make the ship more advanced, he was making it simpler in some ways and more complex in others. Redundant manual controls, he told Jake Morrison. If their energy weapons can disable our electronic systems, we'll have mechanical backups they might not think to look for. Dr. Rodriguez made another discovery while studying Zilani broadcasts. They keep talking about order and coordination. I think their whole society works like a giant computer network. They can share thoughts and work together perfectly, but they might not understand how individual thinking works. Amy Turner had been studying the alien psychology and came to a similar conclusion. They see our individual minds as flawed because we all think differently. But what if that's actually our strength? They can predict how a coordinated enemy will act, but how do you predict chaos? Captain Morrison was training new crews for the rebuilt human fleet. The ships were strange now, part high technology and part simple mechanical systems. Some weapons were electronic and computer-controlled, others were purely mechanical and operated by hand. If they can disable our computers, we'll fight them with crowbars and hammers if we have to, he told his officers. Alex Turner, Amy's brother, was training Marine units for space combat. He was a tough sergeant who had fought in conflicts all over Earth. The aliens think we're primitive, he told his troops. Good. Let them keep thinking that right up until we show them what primitive really means. Casey Morgan was one of the best pilots in the Space Force. She had been practicing flying ships with all the computer assistants turned off, using only manual controls and her own reflexes. Flying by computer is smooth and predictable, she said. Flying by hand is messy and chaotic. Maybe messy and chaotic is exactly what we need. Rick Stone was an explosives expert who had been working with Dr. Bell on new weapons. They use energy shields and armor, he explained, but shields are designed to stop energy weapons and fast-moving projectiles. What if we hit them with something really slow and really heavy? As the months passed, the Zalani monitoring stations kept broadcasting their messages. The aliens seemed completely confident that humans would eventually surrender. They had seen this pattern before on other worlds. Fear would spread, some groups would want to submit, and eventually the whole species would give up rather than face destruction. But the aliens had never encountered humans before. They had conquered 17 star systems full of species that thought in orderly, predictable ways, species that could be analyzed and understood and defeated with superior technology. They had never met a species that looked at impossible odds and said, "Hold my beer." Admiral Brooks stood in the command center of the rebuilt space fleet and looked at the reports coming in from around the solar system. Every human ship, station, and colony was preparing for war in their own unique way. No two preparations were exactly alike because no two humans thought exactly alike. "The Zalani think chaos is a weakness," she said to her staff. "They're about to learn that sometimes chaos is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy." The year was almost up, and humanity was as ready as it could be. Not ready in the way the aliens expected, with bigger ships and better energy weapons. Ready in a way that no orderly, predictable species could ever understand. Ready to be human. The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Liberty as it moved slowly through space near Jupiter. Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the giant planet spin in the darkness. His ship was not the biggest or fastest that Earth had built, but it was strong and reliable. The crew of 200 men and women had been traveling for 3 months to reach this meeting point. Commander Lisa Hayes walked up to him with a datapad in her hands. She was the best diplomat Earth had, and today she would need all her skills. "Captain, the long-range sensors are picking up something big coming our way," she said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. Pete Collins looked up from his engineering station. The big man had fixed more broken machines than anyone else in the fleet. "Sir, whatever that thing is, it's huge. Maybe 10 times bigger than our ship." His fingers moved quickly over his controls. "And it's using some kind of power source I've never seen before." Amy Turner was busy at her science station. She studied alien life for a living, but today would be the first time any human had actually met real aliens. "The energy readings are incredible," she said. "This technology is way beyond anything we have." Jake nodded and pressed the ship-wide communication button. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to make first contact with an alien species. Everyone stay calm and do your jobs. This is what we trained for." He looked at Lisa. "Are you ready for this?" Lisa straightened her uniform. "As ready as anyone can be for something that has never happened before." She had studied every language on Earth and knew how to talk to anyone. But these weren't humans. The alien ship appeared on their main screen and everyone on the bridge went quiet. It was massive and shaped like a crystal that had been stretched out. Beautiful lights moved along its surface in patterns that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The ship was so big that the Liberty looked like a toy next to it. "Incoming transmission," said the communications officer. "It's strange. The signal is going directly into our computers somehow." Jake sat down in his captain's chair. "Put it on screen." The image that appeared made several crew members step back. The alien was tall and thin, covered in what looked like living crystal. Its face had no mouth, but two large eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. When it spoke, the words appeared in their minds rather than their ears. I am Overseer Kethvar of the Zalani hegemony. We have come to examine the primitive life forms that have begun to leave their small world. The alien's mental voice was cold and seemed to look down on them. Lisa stepped forward. I am Commander Lisa Hayes, speaking for the people of Earth. We welcome this chance to meet and learn from each other. The alien's eyes seemed to focus on her and then look past her at the ship around them. Your vessel is crude metal held together with simple welds. Your minds produce chaotic noise instead of ordered thought. How did such primitive creatures even reach space? Pete's face turned red, but he stayed quiet. Amy was taking notes as fast as she could write. Jake felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice level. We may not be as advanced as you, but we're willing to learn and share what we know. Kethvar made a sound that might have been laughter. Share? What could primitives like you possibly offer to a civilization that has conquered 17 star systems? The alien paused and seemed to be talking to someone they couldn't see. My ship's sensors have analyzed your biology and technology. You are barely above the level of animals. Lisa tried again. Perhaps we could arrange for some of our scientists to meet with yours. We could exchange information about our cultures and history. Your culture? Kethvar's mental voice grew even colder. You wage wars against your own species. You pollute your world and fight over resources like beasts. Your minds cannot even communicate properly with each other. The alien gestured, and the image changed to show Earth from space. We have watched your world for some time. You are chaos given form. Jake stood up. We may not be perfect, but we've come a long way. We've learned to work together and reach for the stars. Reached for the stars? Kethvar seemed amused. You barely crawled out of your gravity well using chemical rockets. The Zalani crossed galaxies when your species was still living in caves. Amy spoke up. Could you tell us about your people? How long have you been traveling in space? The alien looked at her like she was a curious insect. We evolved beyond your primitive state millions of years ago. We learned to share thoughts, to work as one mind with many bodies. We bring order to chaos wherever we find it. The image on the screen changed to show gleaming cities on distant worlds. 17 systems now know peace under Zalani guidance. Guidance? Lisa asked. The lesser species we encounter are given a choice. Submit to our wisdom and evolve under our direction, or remain primitive and be left behind. Kethvar's eyes seemed to glow brighter. You will be given the same choice. Jake felt his anger rising. And if we choose to remain independent? Independence. The alien's mental laughter was like ice. Look at your ship, your technology, your chaotic minds. You cannot survive in a galaxy where real civilizations exist. You need guidance to become something more than clever animals. Pete couldn't stay quiet anymore. We built this ship with our own hands and minds. We solved problems and made it work. That counts for something. Kethvar seemed to notice Pete for the first time. Your engineering is primitive but functional, like a tool made by an animal. Impressive for your level but useless compared to proper technology. The alien gestured again, and suddenly the Liberty's lights went dim. What did you do? Jake demanded. Simple demonstration. My ship just disabled your main engines with a single pulse of energy. Your primitive shields and armor might as well be paper. The lights came back on, but Jake could hear the difference in the engine sound. They were dead in space. Lisa tried one more time. Surely we can find some middle ground? Some way to coexist without anyone having to submit to anyone else? Coexist? Kethvar's mental voice turned sharp. A primitive species cannot coexist with an advanced one any more than a wild animal can coexist with a farmer. The animal either becomes domesticated or it is removed. Jake's hands formed fists at his sides. Is that a threat? It is reality. You have one cycle of your planet around your star to make your choice. Submit to Zilani guidance and begin your evolution into something worthy of the galaxy or face corrective action. The alien's image began to fade. Choose wisely, primitives. This offer will not be made again. The transmission ended, and the massive alien ship began to move away. Jake watched it disappear into the darkness between the stars, leaving the disabled Liberty drifting in space near Jupiter. "Pete, how bad is the damage?" Jake asked. Pete was already checking his systems. "They fried our main drive completely, but the backup systems are still working. We can get home, but it'll take twice as long." Amy was still staring at her readings. "Captain, the technology they used to disable us, I don't even understand how it works." Lisa sat down heavily in her chair. 1 year. They gave us 1 year to decide the fate of our entire species. Jake looked out at the stars again. They didn't look friendly anymore. "Then we better make sure we choose right."